how's everybody doing today? I hope you're doing great. Just had a few thoughts, really one thought, about the crucifixion, and I just wanted to share it. So this is coming out of Psalm 22, and most people know that when Jesus was on the cross, he quoted the first verse of Psalm 22. Now, in the Jewish tradition, when a rabbi quotes a verse, what he's trying to do in the minds of his listeners is he's trying to pull up the context. He's trying to make them think about the context of that verse, the entire context, not just the verse itself, but really where it's coming from. Most scholars today will accept that Psalm 22 is a messianic prophetic psalm. I agree that it is. I really do. I see the Savior all over this psalm. We could look at tons of things. I mean, we could probably do lesson after lesson after lesson on Psalm 22 alone. But I want to focus on just one verse and imagine that Jesus is actually saying these words. This is the Savior talking to us. So he says in verse 6, "But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people." And if you stop and think about it, that really is truly what happened to Jesus when he was arrested and tried and whipped and crucified. He was despised by the people. Very, very true. You could easily say, yes, that's Jesus talking. The word I want to draw attention to here is the word worm. In the Hebrew, it is Towla. So the Towla worm. This is an animal that lives in the Middle East still today. They're still around. And the Towla worm is really kind of a neat little animal. It's a little gruesome, but it is a neat story. So the Towla worm is like a scarlet color. And what happens when it's time for her to give birth, to lay her eggs, is she takes her body and she attaches it to a tree or a branch. And she permanently affixes herself to that tree. She will never leave the tree again. In other words, she dies there. Her last act is giving or laying eggs, okay, and perpetuating her species. So she attaches herself permanently to this tree and makes this case around her body that seals her in. And she lays her eggs underneath herself. And then as she dies, the color from her body stains the wood that she's attached to a beautiful scarlet crimson color. And so then the eggs underneath, when it's time for them to hatch, they've been protected and they can break out of that casing then when it's time for them to come out. But what a really neat picture. It's exactly what Jesus did. He allowed himself to be affixed to a cross, a tree, and he dies there so that he might bring many sons and daughters to glory, right? That comes out of Hebrews chapter 3. Or is it 13? Chapter 2. It's chapter 2. Anyway, Hebrews chapter 2 talks about him bringing many sons and daughters to glory. And the way that he did that was because of his blood that allows us to be cleansed, right? It's such a beautiful, just amazing thing that God has just woven nature and all these little pictures into his word. It's really quite incredible. I don't think we can ever reach the bottom of the things that God has placed in his word. It's almost like little treasure hunts. You can go on these little treasure hunts and find these really interesting and neat correlations between nature and science and mathematics and all kinds of things. But in this case, the Towla worm is very much like our Savior. I hope that thought just blesses you this Easter. Have a great Good Friday and a great Easter celebration. We'll talk to you next time.